Welcome to the series of Relational Database Management System. Myself is Fatima Rafiq, Assistant Professor, Abidin Amda Senior College, PCA Department. We have already started with the unit number 5, that is crash recovery. We have seen the failure classification. We saw what is log file, what is checkpoint, and what is commit. Today, we will be starting with the log-based recovery method. The log-based recovery technique maintains a transaction log to keep track of all its update operation of the transaction. It assumes that only one transaction is active at a time. There are two techniques to achieve the log-based recovery. We know that whenever the transaction is running, at that same time, we maintain one file that is called log file. So if the recovery is, we will be doing a recovery by using that log file. It is nothing but a log-based recovery method. The log-based recovery method is having a two technique to achieve the recovery procedure. Number one is deferred modification technique. It records all the database changes in the log, but it defer or delay the execution of write operation until the transaction is in the partially committed state. If you remember, we have studied the transaction state. In that, we have seen that the transaction in the partial committed state when it executes its last instruction. Whenever there is end find by the transaction, it will delay or defer all its write operation. These write operations are delay until when the transaction enters into the partially executed or partially committed state. It does not physically update in the database until the transaction has reached its commit point. And once the transaction commit or it reach to the commit instruction, then only the changes in the write operation will be done. Before reaching the commit point, all the modifications are recorded in the local storage. Before the commit, before the commit operation, the whatever write operation is executed by the transaction is recorded in the local storage in the main memory. If transaction fail before the commit, then there is no need of changing anything in the database. That is, undo does not require. Why we are saying this? Because here the changes whatever the transaction is doing by using the write operation is not happening actually onto the database, but it is happening in the local storage. So if something goes down, or because of some reason, if the transaction fails, then the commit operation, before its commit, then we need not do any changes in the database, because we have not made any changes of the write instruction into the database. So undo is not required, but we can need redo operation for record in the local storage. Hence, the deferred update method is also called as no undo redo algorithm. So here we need to, because if the transaction fails, we want these transactions to be implemented, or the changes has to be implemented into the secondary device, the actual database. So if we are using the deferred modification technique, so this is also called as no undo or redo method. We'll see the deferred modification update method procedure first. What is the procedure of deferred update modification? Before the TI transaction started execution, we will record TI start into the system log. Whenever there is an instruction write I of a transaction, any particular transaction, we will record the entry as TI, X and V2 in the system log. When TI partially committed, we record TI commit in the write to the log. If some failure occur, then after the crash, if log entry of the transaction contain TI start and TI commit, both the log, then the operation which is performed is redo on, otherwise no redo. Like if you find the log file and that log file is containing both the entry, that is TI start and TI commit, it means that the transaction is committed. So the effect which is present in the local memory has to be permanently saved into the storage area where the database is actually gets stored. So at that time we will be performing redo operation. But if we find only the entry ti start but not ti commit, so at that time we need not do anything in the process of deferred update recovery method. Now here is the example of deferred method where I have a transaction T1 and transaction T2, and this is a system log file which is maintained, and these are the set of instructions. If Ti and T2 are executed serially, the system log will contain the information as shown above. Consider if the system crash before completing the schedule, then case number 1, crash occur during the write B. Whenever we are performing a write B, let's consider crash occur during this write B. So after the crash, log records only the instruction which is the instruction number 1, 2 and 3. Since Ti is not committed, this T1 transaction is not a committed transaction, so there is no need of doing the redo operation. Consider the case number 2, crash occur during the write C here. So when we are when the transaction is executing write C operation, after the crash, now the log file, what the log file will contain, it will contain the entry of transactions instruction number 1 to 6. Since Ti is started and committed, T1 is started and committed, also T1 will be redo. T2 does not have committed transaction, so for T2 we need not do undo operation. See here, the entry Ti start and T1 commit is there. So because if the system crash at this particular state, so here for a T1 we need to redo operation. We need to perform the redo operation. Why? Because we want these effects to be permanently stored on the secondary device. But for a T2 transaction, because it does not have an entry, the T2 commit, the system gets crash by here itself. So for T2 transaction we need not do anything. Case number 3, crash occur after write C. We have performed the write C, and here the entry of T2 commit will be there. So the recovery, the log file will contain all the 7 recorded all the 7 instructions. Since here we find the transaction T1 has its starts and commit entry, and T2 is also having its starts and commit entry. So for this particular case, we need to redo the transaction T1 as well as redo the transaction T2. So the database should be in the consistent state. This is all about the deferred update recovery method. If you find, we'll see the one more example in the next lecture. If you find any difficulty regarding this particular topic, you can write in the comment box. Thank you.